What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Here, guys, Derek and Cody with you as always. And guys, I think I did a video somewhat similar to this, like right at the end of the season, talking about like some moves I thought I would make to maybe improve the Colts. But we're going to sit here together and we're going to kind of talk about what our dream offseason kind of looks like. Obviously, it's a little premature. We don't know all the details of everything that's going to happen. But if we were GMs and we were sitting in Chris Ballard's shoes, right now, this is kind of some of the stuff we would be thinking about going into this season. But before we do that, I just want to say real quick that this episode is presented by FanDuel. So shout out to them. Cody, I think we can talk real quick about, certain players that we'd be looking to trade, we'd be looking to cut, all those different things, trying to improve your cap space. Because as you currently sit here, you're sitting at around $34 million, which I think as it currently sits would sit you kind of somewhere between 17 and 22 between in the NFL right now. So you're still kind of in the middle of the pack, not quite as much, but we want to talk about some things that could not only improve that cap, but at the same time could potentially get you some trade capital, some draft capital, something to work towards come April. So first person on this list, Cody, who do we have here as the first contract we're looking to try to fix?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the bigger talking points for people about like what the Colts could do with their own guys. That, of course, is Michael Pittman Jr., Derek, who obviously the Colts extended a couple off seasons ago and making a good chunk of change here, Derek, for the Indianapolis Colts. And so a lot of people saying you got to figure out something with that contract, right? It'd almost be malpractice to go out there and continue to allow Michael Pittman Jr. to play on the current contract he is on, right? So I think right now there's two options that the Indianapolis Colts need to do here, Derek. The first option would be, hey, we go to Michael Pittman and we say, hey, man, we like what you've done for this organization. You're obviously a homegrown guy, but we need to figure out a way to fix that contract, right? So you need to figure out a way to significantly, rework that contract because let's face it, Derek, Michael Pittman Jr. has not necessarily been a guy that has been worth the contract that you gave him, right? You got to figure out a way to rework that contract, right? Or you got to figure out a way, whether that's, restructuring, whether that's outright cutting him, or whether that's finding a trade partner for Michael Pittman Jr. And Derek, if you're able to do that, you save around $24 million if you're able to do that. So, you save a good chunk of change there if you're able to move off of that Pittman contract, or even if you're able to get, cut that contract. I don't know where Pittman's at, if he's even willing to do that, but if he's willing to, and you're able to recoup, $10 million or something around there, right? That's significant for Michael Pittman because, Dirk, we like Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman could very well be a wide receiver too and fill that role fine. I really believe that, but the problem is you're paying him like a number one, and he hasn't necessarily produced like a number one, right? So, and also just with the fact that there's another wide receiver that you must re-sign that we believe is much better at this point than Michael Pittman Jr. as an overall wide receiver and has been more productive as an overall wide receiver. It just seems like this is a contract that you have to either figure out a way to restructure or you're going to have to cut it some way.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all there. When you talk about just trying to influence the contract in some way, shape, or form. I personally would love to keep Michael Pittman on this roster, Cody. I feel like you probably feel the same way. You would prefer to not have to try to draft another wide receiver that can do the things that Michael Pittman can do. But for the contract that he currently is under, it's not worth what the production he's giving you. So clearly $29 million is not enough or is too much. You need to be able to cut that contract basically in half because, we've seen it too many times, Cody. He disappears in big games and disappears when, his quarterback has issues, so that becomes a problem of the best wide receivers in the game. They can, no matter who the quarterback is, they are going to be the target because the scheme revolves around those guys being great. Michael Pittman doesn't do that. So definitely needs to see a major cut in his contract of at least 10 plus million. And if he's not going to do that, you definitely need to trade him or cut him. And it could save you up to $24 million, which would, that's almost half your cap as it is. And it just would skyrocket you. So if you did trade or cut Michael Pittman, and so even if you were willing to say, hey, we'll take like 10 million of that contract, that still would save you $14 million. And so you would go from $34 million to $48 million just in that one move. Now, when you talk about another couple players here, Cody, and this one I think all of Colts Nation can get behind, and I know you and I will too, and that's cutting Zaire Franklin. Let's be honest. Zaire Franklin's getting older. He is not athletic enough nor skillful enough to play the position in which he is at right now. He's not. I don't care what smarts you have or how respected you are in the locker room as a competitor. You are not good enough, and you are just not good enough. You are not athletic enough to be able to do the responsibilities that every DC at this point in time that has tried to work with you has tried to fix, and it's not gotten better. It has only gotten worse. Cody, we've been saying it over the last few years. His pass coverage has been getting worse and worse every single year. And all in all, his tackling has been getting worse and worse and worse every year. So it definitely is the smart decision to cut Zaire Franklin and save yourself $6 million.
I mean, Chris Ballard said it at the end of the year, right? We showed our age. We were slow. We were old, right? And frankly, like, you need, no pun intended, you got to move on from that. You just got to move on from that. And Derek, that's not even mentioning some of the off the field distractions that he's had the last couple of years as well, right? Yes. So I just think you need a completely fresh start, right? You need fresh blood completely in this linebacker room. I think you just need to completely gut it, restart, right? I know you have some younger guys. You can keep those guys around, but from looking for some starters for 2026, I think this is a position that you have to just completely move on from all the guys who got significant snaps last year. Because I said it in season, Derek. I've said it, in the offseason. I firmly believe it was the worst linebacker room in the NFL. I don't think it was necessarily any close to anybody else. Like, I think it was that bad. I mean, it was so easy, Derek, for any offense to just attack the middle all the time. And I know it wasn't all completely the linebacker's fault, but your linebackers couldn't cover anything. Like, I'll be honest, Derek, like, Zaire Franklin is not a starting caliber linebacker on any football team. He's not. He's one of the worst linebackers in the NFL. He's been one of the worst linebackers the last 2 years. You're right. He's getting older. You save some cap by outright cutting him. You just move on. You start fresh at that linebacker position. You give Lou Anarumo a chance to find his own guys, right? Whatever that looks like. And I just think you have to move on. I really do at this point. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, your linebacker play was far from adequate. I mean, that's almost putting it lightly. Like, it was bad. It was catastrophic last year. So this is by far, I think, Derek, the worst position you have on your football team. And that's saying something, because you definitely have some other positions. You're like, that's not that great either. But linebacker with Zaire Franklin, it's time to move on. It's time to go forward.
Yeah. And so we continue to move on here. Cody, we talked about letting Charvarius Ward kind of decide what you're going to do with Kenny Moore. You don't want to have to lose both Ward and Kenny Moore this offseason if you can help it. Don't want to go ahead and add more holes into the roster than you already have. But if the Colts did want to move on from Kenny Moore, that would save you over $7 million. That is very well an option that they could take. We'll actually talk about Charvarius Ward here in a second. But, Cody, we kind of had another player here in Anthony Richardson that we've talked a lot about, and people are talking a lot about on his future with the Indianapolis Colts. And what do you think that we should do with Anthony Richardson moving forward here?
Yeah, I think you got to get rid of him. I think you got to trade him, Derek. I know fans won't like that, but it's very obvious that Anthony Richardson doesn't have a future with the Indianapolis Colts, barring something that happens to Daniel Jones, right? There's just no way at this point with what you've said about Daniel Jones and how you've essentially committed to him, without even having him technically under contract right now. Like, he's going to be your starter this coming year. He's going to be your quarterback for at least 2026, if not longer. And so I think it makes perfect sense I feel like there's got to be a team out there that's willing to give you some sort of capital for him, whether that's, a mid-round pick. I don't know what it's going to do, but he's still young. He's very athletic, right? And maybe there's a team that's like, we're willing to kind of throw a dart at the dartboard, for a player like Anthony Richardson, for a talent like Anthony Richardson, and maybe we can bet on, okay, he's in a new situation. He'll figure it out, whatever. But from a Colts standpoint, it makes too much sense. If you do get rid of him, you save a little bit under $11 million. So, I mean, that's significant, Derek, because, Anthony Richardson, he's in the last year of his contract here, right? So you got to figure out what you're going to do with him, and he's going to get expensive if you keep him around any longer. So, yeah, I do think if you're the Colts, it makes a ton of sense here. Move on from Anthony Richardson, give him a fresh start, and also maybe get some capital for him. I mean, anything at this point, especially with, how you don't have your first round pick, it matters. It's significant, right? So I think it makes some sense there from the Colts standpoint to just trade Anthony Richardson, give him a fresh start somewhere, get some capital back, and just move forward with Daniel Jones as your guy. It kind of seems like it's trending that direction to me, Derek. So that's what I would do if I'm the Indianapolis Colts, and maybe you can get a team to give you a higher pick. Who knows, man? But certainly from a Colts standpoint, I think it makes the most sense.
Right, absolutely. And then going into the Charvarius Ward thing, so Cody, we kind of already talked about it, about it's 50-50 right now on whether or not Charvarius Ward retires. I mean, honestly, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, in my personal opinion, I think you should try to ask him to retire because he's already made it clear if he receives another concussion, he's going to retire at that point anyway. And you don't want to have, first of all, that on your conscience of knowing that at any moment this guy could have his career ended on that football field with that in mind, knowing you could have asked him to not do that. And secondly, if he does decide to retire middle of the season, that puts you in a worse scenario because you had a chance to fix that scenario in the offseason in some way, and he put you in that position. I mean, I don't think he's willingly doing it, but I mean, but by him staying, he is putting you in that situation because you never know when he might have his career over. So if you're the Colts and you're the GM, I mean, are you asking Ward to retire even if it means you're saving a little less money by giving him a little more, maybe to incentivize him to try to retire?
I mean, I think you just have to give him an ultimatum at some point, right? And again, I know, this is a serious decision that he has to make. So I think you just say, hey, man, I appreciate where you're at. I completely understand, the situation, what you're pondering. Just for our standpoint and our sake, we need to kind of know. And it's weird because when he came out and said, if I get one more, I'm done. You're like, dude, you can't just go out and say that, right? Because you're like, that basically tells I think from a Colts standpoint, I'm panicking, right? Because I'm like, one more and you're done? Are you serious? I understand that, but from a roster standpoint, to have a guy retire in the middle of the season, I mean, that would just mess up so much. And so I think you just have to say, hey, man, whatever decision you make, we respect it, but we need you to make that decision here, at some point and set that date and just say, let us know. But we also need you to, if you do say yes, I'm going to stay, we also need to have the understanding that you're not just going to up and leave us, right? When, if it happens again. So it's a tricky situation, man, because it's you want him to do the best for him and his family, but also you also need him to, be all in, right? If he's going to stick around, he needs to be all in because you're right. If you get into that situation, I know it's for him and it's best for his family, but you're kind of screwed, right? So it's an odd situation from a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. You have to also make a decision what's best for the team as well. So it's a very tricky situation. And, you're kind of like also like, dude, what are you waiting for in a certain way? Because I understand like it's a big decision, but you've been advised by people close to you to retire. So I'm just like, at some point you just got to make that decision one way or another. And then you got to stick with it, So that's kind of what I would do. But again, maybe not everybody's, in that line of thinking, but you got to kind of find the balance if you're Chris Ballard and the people, in charge of the cap and stuff. You got to figure out the balance between, professionalism, business, mind savvy, all that stuff, but also from a, human standpoint as well, right? So it's just a tricky situation all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, with all that in consideration, let's just say on the conservative low end of everything that we suggested that the Colts do, on the low end, that would still save you about $35 million. And that's a conservative number, Cody. That's a conservative number. So if you did stuff with Pittman, if you cut Franklin, if you either moved on from Kenny Moore or moved on from Charvarius Ward and you traded Anthony Richardson, on the low end, you save $35 million. So that would double your cap. You are at $70 million at this point in time if you're the Indianapolis Colts. Now, you have to think about who are the must resigns. And Cody, I think there's two names you and I both agree on that are musts. This isn't and we'll discuss who might be a resign, but who are the two players that we're saying you must resign this offseason and why?
Yeah, I mean, kind of from what I talked about earlier with the Anthony Richardson thing, I think Daniel Jones has to be the re-sign, right? Because look what he was doing for you when he was healthy, right? And again, you have to understand as well, he's also had his fair share of injuries, right? So does that factor into it with the contract? Maybe. Yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that showed you that he can play at a high level when given the opportunity. And I know people like to point to, well, you didn't play anybody, but they don't factor in. You also did play some pretty good defenses at times, right? So, again, I know it wasn't always perfect for Daniel Jones, but I think certainly he gave you the best quarterback performance since probably 2018 Andrew Luck, honestly, man. When he was playing at his height, I think he was. I really do. I mean, obviously, Phil Rivers did really great stuff in 2020 as well. I don't want to discount that. But all that to say, he's given you the best quarterback play you've had in quite some time. And I think that's something that you just have to keep around, man, because obviously we know Daniel Jones is a hard worker, first one in, last one out. Obviously he showed that he can be accurate with the football. He's got the athleticism. The biggest question for me, Derek, is just the health. How does he look after that, recovery from that Achilles injury? And, is he the same player? And, can he stay healthy? I think those are the biggest questions that you have with Daniel Jones moving forward. But from a player standpoint, from a person standpoint, from a worker standpoint, he's certainly everything that you're looking for in a quarterback, right? And that's what the Colts liked. They took a chance on him, gave him a, low end kind of deal, and it paid off. It really did. So I think you want to keep him around, and especially Derek now with the lack of first round picks for the next 2 years, I think Daniel Jones is your guy for at least the next 2 years. And, you kind of go from there after that. But that's what I would say for that. And then the second guy I would say is the guy he's going to throw the football to, and a big reason why we're either getting rid of Pittman or significantly cutting his deal, Alec Pierce. Derek, every single year since he came into the league in 2022, Alec Pierce has been better every single year. 2022 to 2025, Alec Pierce, he's light years better than he was, and he keeps getting better, which is definitely exciting in itself there, Derek, for a player like Alec Pierce, who, obviously a guy that, at one time it's kind of crazy to think about, Derek, that Alec Pierce, it was in question if Alec Pierce was going to be a starter a couple years ago, right? But he has obviously, completely raised the bar in less targets. He had the third most targets of any wide receiver, yet led the Colts in receiving yards by a couple hundred yards, which is crazy. He led the league in, receiving yards per catch once again for the second straight year. and he's only 25 years old. I mean, he's in the prime of his career right now, Derek. So Alec Pierce, I think he is the top must sign for me.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, these are two players that, again, were very intricate in whatever offensive success you had this year. Ultimately, when you look at just the numbers, I mean, Cody, I don't even know if, like, what the number would be on Jones. I got to imagine that the number on Pierce is probably going to be somewhere around 25 million. I don't think it'll be anything above that because, again, this is the first time that Alec Pierce got over 1,000 yards receiving in his career. And, I mean, again, he's not a one-trick pony, but he is mainly good at just mostly one thing, which is, again, leads the NFL in yards per reception 2 years in a row, which is definitely going to warrant some good money. And then, of course, like you said, if you are cutting Pittman, then that ultimately makes it just that much more important that you keep Alec Pierce around. And also, he said he'd be much more inclined to stick around if you re-sign Daniel Jones, which is another thing. I mean, again, Cody, we can keep talking about it, how, Jones and his injuries and injury history and how that could impact how much money he makes this year. But at the same time, Cody, I mean, I'm thinking about it from Daniel Jones's agent's sake, and I'm like, I mean, what other choice do the Colts have? Right? They have to pay you. They have to pay you big because what do they gain by not paying you? If you don't sign with them and you don't play for them. Now, I don't think Daniel Jones is getting big money from anyone else, Cody. Anyone else. I don't think that it'll happen. But Daniel Jones has the leg up in the fact that if he doesn't sign with them, they either have to run with Riley Leonard or they have to run with Anthony Richardson. Which, again, if you decide to get rid of Anthony Richardson, then you also are shooting yourself in the foot with that one. And there's no way in hell that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are going to run their hopes and dreams on Riley Leonard being the starting quarterback for 17 games. Sure. It's not happening. So,
well, that's what I was going to say. Also, the fact that you have a GM and coach whose future beyond this year is very much in question. They need to win now, right? So why would they go out and roll with players who, Riley Leonard, great game against, Houston, but he's going into his second year, right? And Anthony Richardson's never been able to stay healthy, let alone be a good quarterback. So, yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Yeah. So, obviously, those are some must for the re-signs. Now, there is one player in particular that we talked about, Cody, as what you deemed as a yellow flag when we're talking about maybe a re-sign, and that is safety Nick Cross, who is a free agent for the first time, and ultimately it is going to come down to it's mainly going to come down to what the market is. That's going to be the big understanding of what Nick Cross's value is going to be. So if he wants a lot more money, then you might just have to either go with another safety in free agency that's less, or you need to draft one in the draft this year, which you're capable of doing. But yeah, I mean, is there a price in mind that you would think about if you're thinking for Nick Cross?
So I feel like projections have been kind of like all over the place for Nick Cross. I feel like how the second half of the season, went out for Nick Cross, he kind of was struggling at times, right? So I kind of wonder if that price has dropped a little bit. I'm kind of around the range of like 8 to 10 million, I think is kind of the range from what I understand. I could be completely off on that, but like for a player like that, Derek, he's 24 years old. You drafted him when he was 20 years old, right? So he's a young player. You don't have a lot of young talent on your team right now. I know the second half of the season wasn't great, and that might help with the negotiating price. But Derek, I think for the right price, if you keep Nick Cross around, it's an argument that I would also make for like Michael Pittman, right? You can either, if you decide to move on, there's just another hole you have to try to fill this offseason, right? And maybe you can fill it and you can fill it better. But for a player that's young like Nick Cross that has proven he can play at a high level at times, and if you can get him for the right price and you can get him for the next number of years, I think it makes sense for the Indianapolis Colts to do that. But again, you're right. If he's going out and asking for way too much money that you're comfortable with, then yeah, I think you can go out in free agency and get somebody to play that box safety for you. I do. So that's kind of where I sit when it comes to that, when it comes to Nick Cross, because athletically, Derek, he's got everything you're looking for in a safety, right? And so that's what I would say for Nick Cross is just depending on the price, that would be the reason why I would say no. But if you can keep him around and you can eliminate safety from being a primary need and you can kind of just focus down your biggest needs and just really, really hammer it home on improving those, kind of like what you did with the DBs last year, right? If you can do that this year with that front seven and you don't have another hole to try to fill, I think it makes a lot of sense. I have one more player I want to say too. Blake Grupe. I mean, we argued about this. I think you put him in the yellow. I put him in the green. I mean, based off of how he did this year, again, I know it was only like half a season, but out of all the things that went wrong, the kicker did not with Blake Grupe. I mean, he was phenomenal. He was perfect on everything that he did. So I would say Blake Grupe is a guy I'm definitely bringing back because we know, Derek, how much the Colts have had their struggles at kicker. And so I'd bring him back. I'd have him and Spencer Schrader compete it out because there's no guarantee Spencer Schrader is going to get back to where he was. I mean, there's no guarantee of that. That's a big injury, Derek. So I would bring back Blake Grupe without hesitation and just let them compete it out and may the best man win, right? Because Blake Grupe also showed, Derek, he got a pretty big leg. He hit that 60-plus yard field goal in Seattle that if your defense didn't fold at the end, you win that game. So it's hard to find kickers that can kick, especially in environments like Seattle. So I'm keeping Blake Grupe around.
Yeah, I totally understand, and that's something that it's something that I have to think about a little more,
Sure.
Because I think that there's an argument to be made for just keeping Schrader. There's an argument to having them as competition. It just depends. But and as far as some of the biggest of needs, I don't think it's as big as everything else, but I digress. Going forward here, we're going to talk a little bit more about what we actually need to attack in free agency. I think the number one thing, Cody, that we clearly know that the Colts need to go out of their way to do in free agency this year is find edge help. You absolutely need edge help in free agency. I don't care who it is. You need to make moves. Because, Cody, you said it, or we've been saying it a long time. After this year, you're going to have 2 edge players under contract going into this offseason. And that is Laiatu Latu and JT Tuimuluau. That's it. And neither one of them is going to be the next great thing. Latu could be, but jury's still out. But Samson Ebukam, who is 31 years old, came off that Achilles injury, did not have a great season. I know Chris Ballard does not really believe that. I know he said that Ebukam did some great things this year, but he's sticking up for his players. But I know he doesn't believe that. Kwity Paye has been virtually nothing, Cody, ever since he's been drafted. Got paid too much money as it was last season when they exercised his 5th-year option, and he got $13.5 million to basically do nothing. That's what he did all year. And, of course, Tyquan Lewis, who, again, has been nothing more than a depth piece his entire career. So you need help. Not only do you need bodies, you need an actual player that is actually going to find a way to win their matchups on the outside. Laiatu Latu isn't doing it enough. And DeForest Buckner is only getting older. He is not going to be able to consistently do it all the time. He might get double teams more often, which means your guys on the edge should be winning their matchups. And right now, you currently don't. And another name I kept bringing up, Cody, it's Trey Hendrickson. I know that this last season, He had the injuries, and that obviously isn't a great look when it comes to it. And I know he's aging, but that could really come in handy if you want to get him for a discounted rate. But if you're wanting to take a shot in the dark and go after a guy that has the pedigree and is just 2 years removed from being the second most sacks in the National Football League in 2023 or in 2024, you need to go and make moves like that. It doesn't have to just be Hendrickson, but you need somebody.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Derek, like you said, Latu, he's been fine, but he hasn't been elite, right? He hasn't been the player you hoped he would be when he came out of that 2024 draft. Now, he's gotten better every year, but you truly need a disruptive edge, right? And there's not a ton on the market, like not a ton of like high name guys this year. Rarely they are. They do hit the market rarely. But yeah, I think you're right. You need to get somebody. And again, I know some people will say that injury, that why would you sign an aging player off an injury? But Derek, like you said, Trey Hendrickson in 2024 has more sacks in your entire defensive end room right now under contract. So that is definitely something that you can't just go out and rely on these young guys. Like you need, especially if you're trying to win now, you haven't been able to find a consistent pass rush in forever. You haven't been able to find somebody who's been able to get consistent pressure since Robert Mathis hung it up. So, yeah, if you're the Colts with the Lou connection, I think it makes some sense there. There's also some other players as well at the edge position that you could, look to. Probably wouldn't be as high profile, but, maybe there's some guys that, like we've seen, Derek, with different players the Colts have brought in who didn't necessarily, get opportunities other places, but, they were productive and whenever they were. Maybe there's somebody there that they look to bring in. But, yeah, all that to say, you need some production, and I think you need some sort of proven commodity there at edge, especially if some of these other positions, you're getting back some cap space. You need to put it towards some of the positions that matter. Edge is the position that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it doesn't have to just be Hendrickson. There's a lot of different ways that you can make a move work like that, but you have to find a way. You have to do something to take a shot at it. You could fail miserably, but if you don't take a shot at it, then you're just going to fail just having done the same thing that you always do. And please do not ask Chris Ballard to draft an edge, guys. He has never succeeded in that. So he needs to go free agency because he's had a lot better success going after edge guys in free agency than he has in the draft. And that's saying a lot given the fact that the best edge guy he's ever gotten out of free agency was Justin Houston, I think back in 2021 or in 2020 or whatever year it was, where he got 11 and a half sacks. That's the best it's gotten. So
yeah, you could argue Danico Autry would be another one.
But
I'm still upset they just let him walk. Like, he is still disrupting, man. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it was a really bad idea for him for sure. But yeah, and then obviously when we look at the rest of free agency, you definitely want to try to go after linebacker and cornerback help. Mainly just Cody, we're just saying defense. You gotta invest some resources in that defense, man. I know he did last year. He obviously boosted the secondary quite a bit last year for sure. But obviously cornerback help is just a given, right? Because that's just how the Colts are, always having injuries in their cornerback room. But
and if you're bound to get rid of somebody. Yeah. And if you're bound to get rid of somebody at the corner room, you need some depth there for sure. But yeah, linebacker room, Derek, frankly, this would be a position that I'd be okay double dipping in. Like, I'd be okay bringing in some sort of veteran to be, kind of the main person, and then bringing along a young guy to potentially second or third round pick to come in and fulfill, the other role, right? So I could see, there's a few names, and we'll get into those later, but yeah, you definitely need some linebackers, specifically some linebackers that can cover. That would be really nice. You get a couple guys that can do that on a high level. But yeah, I think, Derek, you notice a trend here. The front seven needs a ton of work right now. And so if you're getting rid of Zaire Franklin, you're probably not re-signing Jermaine Pratt. I mean, maybe. But yeah, you really need to address that linebacker position. That's definitely a big need.
Yeah, no doubt. And then as far as the draft goes, obviously does not have a first rounder this year. But if you're looking at, Cody, how you want to attack the draft, how are you thinking the Colts should do that?
Yeah, I mentioned linebacker. That's one for sure. I mean, obviously, it depends what you do in free agency, right? But I do think there are some positions that you need to look to the future. Depending what happens with Nick Cross, I could see strong safety potentially being a position that you look at. Offensive line, specifically at tackle, because yeah, you did draft Jalen Travis, but there's no guarantee he's going to, have a good second year. We don't know 100%. Right, he was a later round draft pick, mid-round draft pick for a reason. So I think definitely just another offensive tackle there to maybe compete with him. I think you need to be looking towards the future at D tackle as well. I definitely think that's a position I would look at because we talked about it, right? Like DeForest Buckner, as good as he is, he's getting older and he's been injured. He's had his fair share of injuries. So I definitely think you need to start thinking about the future of that position. And so you had the luxury of not having to worry about that for a long time, but I think it's time to do that, especially because both those two guys in the middle, they're 30 or older. So I think that's definitely a position, Derek, that I would start thinking of if I'm the Indianapolis Colts. And obviously, you never know with DBs, right? You just never know. You could draft another corner. I could totally see that, especially if you're like, hey, look, we're already paying Sauce what we're paying him. We're paying either Charvarius or Kenny or both. The kind of money we're paying them, but they're both, getting older. And with Sauce's or with Ward's case, he may not be here much longer. So we need to start thinking about that future, right? There's a lot of positions I could see there, but I think if I'm looking at the specific positions, I'm probably looking at the lines, honestly, the interior of the defensive line and maybe the tackle position of the offensive line. I could see those. Depending what happens with Michael Pittman, I could also see wide receiver as a position that the Indianapolis Colts look to address at some point, in that second or third round, right? Because you have obviously Pierce and you'd have Downs in the slot, but you definitely need kind of that number 2 on the outside. And like we said, Chris Ballard, he found Alec Pierce in the second round. So you never know. There's an opportunity there for you to potentially get another young guy to pair along Pierce on the outside and maybe a player that can maybe do a little bit more down the field and things than Michael Pittman Jr. So it really does depend. There's a lot of dominoes that have to fall here, Derek, obviously, with guys you're going to keep around, guys you might ship off, guys you're going to add in free agency. There's a lot that I think is all dependent on that, and that will kind of tell you a lot of the draft needs, right? Because you remember last year, we talked about how you need to get a free safety. You need to get a free safety. And then he went out and signed Cameron Bynum, and all of a sudden that goes way to the bottom of the list of needs, right? So we never truly know till we see the Colts free agency plan and, who they're keeping around, who they're letting walk. So that's kind of a shot in the dark at this point, right? At this point, Derek, the draft's still 3 months plus away. Free agency's still a couple months away. So we still have a long way to go here before we fully can say. But those would be some positions right now that I would consider if I'm the Colts.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. That would be some of the things that we think the Colts should be doing to try to make this team better in 2026 and to potentially fix this system going forward. If Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are, in fact, the future of this team, start making the moves right, guys. Start finding things that need to be better. But before we do hop out of here again, guys, remember, FanDuel, we know what's going on with the NFL playoffs right now. Championship weekends are coming up here shortly, but there's more than just NFL, guys. FanDuel also has just about every single sport you could possibly enjoy. So if you guys want to go out there, make some bets on a couple different sports that you guys thoroughly enjoy, doesn't have to be a lot, just go out there and find what tickles your fancy. So go on out there, do what you do, head over to FanDuel. But guys, that's going to do it for this one. Let us know in the comments what you guys would do to fix the Indianapolis Colts in 2026. And again, I'm going to say it because I said it in the other video too. Don't put in the comments, fire Chris Ballard, okay? Because we've already said that. We all feel that way, but it's time to move on from it. Just actually give a logical answer as to what you think that needs to be done to make this team better going forward, because that's ultimately the goal here. That's what we want to see happen. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for all the support. And as always, guys, Colts.